pottery was produced in enormous quantities in ancient Rome, mostly for utilitarian purposes. It is found all over the former Roman Empire and beyond. Ponte Testaccio is a huge waste mound in Rome made almost entirely of broken amphorae used for transporting and storing liquids and other products. In this case probably mostly Spanish olive oil, which was landed nearby and was the main fuel for lighting, as well as its use in the kitchen and washing in the baths. It is usual to divide Roman domestic pottery broadly into coarse wares and fine wares, the former being the everyday pottery jars, dishes and bowls that were used for cooking, of the storage and transport of foods and other goods, and in some cases also as tableware, and which were often made and bought locally. Fine wares were serving vessels, a tableware used for more formal dining, and are usually of more decorative and elegant appearance. Some of the most important of these were made at specialized pottery workshops, and were often traded over substantial distances, not only within, but also between, different provinces of the Roman Empire. For example, dozens of different types of British coarse and fine wares were produced locally, yet many other classes of pottery were also imported from elsewhere in the empire. The manufacture of fine wares such as terra sigillata took place in large workshop complexes that were organized along industrial lines and produced highly standardized products that lend themselves well to precise and systematic classification. There is no direct Roman equivalent to the artistically central vase painting of ancient Greece, and few objects of outstanding artistic interest have survived, but there is a great deal of fine tableware and very many small figures, often incorporated into oil lamps or similar objects, and often with religious or erotic themes. Roman burial customs varied over time and space, so vessels deposited as grave goods, the usual source of complete ancient pottery vessels, are not always abundant, though all Roman sites produce plenty of broken pots herds. Fine, rather than luxury pottery is the main strength of Roman pottery, unlike Roman glass, which the elite often used alongside gold or silver tableware, and which could be extremely extravagant and expensive. It is clear from the quantities found that fine pottery was used very widely in both social and geographic terms. The more expensive pottery tended to use relief decoration, usually molded, rather than color, and often copied shapes and decoration from the more prestigious metalwork. Especially in the Eastern Empire, local traditions continued, hybridizing with Roman styles to varying extents. From the 3rd century, the quality of fine pottery steadily declined, partly because of economic and political disturbances, and because glassware was replacing pottery for drinking cups. Fired clay or terracotta was also widely employed in the Roman period for architectural purposes, as structural bricks and tiles, and occasionally as architectural decoration, and for the manufacture of small statuettes and lamps. These are not normally classified under the heading pottery by archaeologists, but the terracottas and lamps will be included in this article. Pottery is a key material in the dating and interpretation of archaeological sites from the Neolithic period onwards, and has been minutely studied by archaeologists for generations. In the Roman period, ceramics were produced and used in enormous quantities, and the literature on the subject, in numerous languages, is very extensive. Fine wares, terra sigillata or red glasswares. The designation fine wares is used by archaeologists for Roman pottery intended for serving food and drink at table, as opposed to pots designed for cooking and food preparation, storage, transport and other purposes. Although there were many types of fine pottery, for example, drinking vessels in very delicate and thin-walled wares, and pottery finished with vitreous lead glazes, the major class that comes first to mind is the Roman red glassware of Italy and Gaul, made and widely traded from the 1st century BC to the late 2nd century AD, and traditionally known as terra sigillata. These vessels have fine, fairly hard and well-fired buff to pink fabrics, with a naturally glossy surface slip ranging in color from light orange to quite a bright red. The variations in the color and texture of both body fabric and slip, as well as the vessel shapes and the designs on the decorated forms, can enable a trained student to identify source, date and often individual workshop quite accurately. Aretine ware, made at Arezzo in Tuscany, was the preeminent type of fine pottery in the 1st century BC and early 1st century AD, and was succeeded by Samian ware, manufactured in a number of centers in Gaul, modern France and Germany. However, the definition of all these terms has varied and evolved over the many generations during which the material has been studied. Technically, red glasswares have much in common with earlier Greek painted pottery, but the decorated forms employ raised, relief decoration rather than painting. African red slipware belonged to the same tradition and continued to be made much later than Italian and Gaulish sigillata, right through to the Islamic conquest. Ars in turn influenced the production of Phaeacian red slip, which is common in the eastern Mediterranean and also appeared occasionally as far west as southern France and Britain. The production of related types of wares existed in Asia Minor and in other eastern regions of the empire, while the Iberian provinces also had local industries producing terra sigillata hispanica, which had some similarities with the Gaulish products. Most of these wares were widely distributed and produced on an industrial scale, and undoubtedly using a high degree of specialization within the workshops. The names of many potters and factory owners are known from the potter's marks frequently applied to fine wares, and can be highly informative. Satia was an especially prominent producer at Arezzo, but wares with his stamps can be shown by modern analysis of the clay to have been produced in Pisa in Tuscany, and at branch factories at both Lyon and La Grave-Fascinque in modern France. However, the interpretation of name stamps can be more complex than it appears at first sight. Bold name stamps visible in decorated areas advertise the name of the factory, but the names of individual artisans working within the pottery, the bowl makers, appear on plain vessels, while the molds for decorated bowls are also sometimes signed freehand by the mold makers, and the signatures also sometimes appear on finished vessels. Theoretically, a decorated vessel might bear the mold maker's name, that of the bowl maker or finisher, and the brand name of the factory in the decoration. The use of slave labor in the Italian workshops is unproven, though some names are certainly of Liberty. The site of La Grave-Fascinque in South Gaul, near Millau, has been extensively studied and excavated. Its products had an immensely wide distribution in the later 1st century AD, and sherds have been found from India to the Sudan and Scotland. In 1895, the German scholar Hans Dragendorf produced a classification of vessel shapes in Roman red glass pottery that is still used. Other scholars added to his numbered forms, and some archaeologists working on the products of specific manufacturing sites, or the finds from important excavations, initiated their own typologies, so that there are now many other classification systems for Aretine and Samian, as there are, indeed, for other classes of Roman pottery, such as the Hayes numbers for African red slip forms. Other numbering systems used with Italian and Gaulish sigillata include those of Daischlet, Norkuhl, Walters, Loschka, Rittling and Ludovici, to name but a few. The most common method of making relief decoration on the surface of an an open terra sigillata vessel was to throw a pottery bowl whose interior profile corresponded with the desired form of the final vessel's exterior. The internal surface was then decorated using individual positive stamps, usually themselves made of fired clay, or small wheels bearing repeated motifs, such as the ovalo design that often formed the upper border of the decoration. Details could also be added by hand with a stylus. When the decoration was complete in intaglio on the interior, the mold was dried and fired in the usual way, and was subsequently used for shaping bowls. Is the bowl dried, it shrank sufficiently to remove it from the mold, after which the finishing processes were carried out, such as the shaping or addition of a foot ring and the finishing of the rim. The details varied according to the form. The completed bowl could then be slipped, dried again, and fired. Closed forms, such as jugs and jars, were seldom decorated in relief using molds, though some vessels of this type were made at Le Grau for sink by making the upper and lower parts of the vessel separately in molds and joining them at the point of widest diameter. Relief decoration of tall vases or jars was usually achieved by using molded appliqué motifs or barbotine decoration. The latter technique was particularly popular at the East Gaulish workshops of Rheinzabern, and was also widely used on other pottery types. Plain sigillata table vessels, which included large platters, shallow dishes in several sizes, slightly deeper bowls, and small cups, were made on the wheel using a range of templates to create very precise profiles. The sizes were also standardized, which would have facilitated the firing, storage and transport of the huge numbers that were made. The evolution in forms matches in many respects that seen in silver and glass table vessels of the same periods, and the precise forms can sometimes be closely dated. The forms archaeologically classified as plain do sometimes bear decoration of a simple kind, often in the form of a ring of rouletting within the flat interior base of a dish. Plain wares also often bear name stamps. Ars ware was the most widely distributed representative of the sigillata tradition in the late Roman period, and similar forms and fabrics were made for more local distribution in Egypt, which had its own very active and diverse ceramic traditions in the Roman period. A wide range of bowls, dishes and flagons were made in Ars, but the technique of making entire relief-decorated vessels in molds was discontinued. Instead, appliqué motifs were frequently used where decoration in relief was required, separately made and applied to the vessel before drying and firing. Stamped motifs were also a favored form of decoration, and in the later centuries, Christian subjects and symbols often appear. Other fine wares. Some of the shapes of Aretine plain wares were quite closely copied in the later 1st century BC and early 1st century AD in a class of pottery made in northeast Gaul and known as Gallo-Belgic ware. Many of these plates and dishes in red slipped and black slipped fabrics bear potter's stamps. Other fine, thin-walled flagons, drinking beakers, bowls and dishes were made locally in most regions of the Roman Empire, including frontier provinces such as Britain. For example, Romano-British colour-coated wares made at Colchester and in the Nene Valley belong to that classification. Several of the pots to the right of the group photograph in the lead section of this article are Nene Valley wares, including the large black beaker decorated with a lively hunting scene of hounds and hares in the barbotine technique. Many decorative techniques were used to beautify pottery tableware, including the use of colored slips, painting, and various textured surfaces. Painted decoration did not, however, continue the Greek and Etruscan traditions as a specialized technique used for elaborate luxury tablewares, though simpler painted designs do appear on many pottery types, both coarse and fine, throughout the empire. The dividing lines between fine and coarse wares, or tablewares and cooking wares, become a little blurred in the case of some of the local, provincial products, because pottery is often multi-purpose. Lead glazed pottery was made in many regions of the Roman Empire, including Gaul, Italy and the eastern provinces. This type of vitreous glaze was most often used for small, decorative items of tableware, including mold-made cups with relief decoration, lamps and zoomorphic containers. The glazes vary in color from amber to brown and many shades of green. Tableware made of Egyptian faience glazed in vivid blue, turquoise or green, continued to be manufactured in Egypt throughout the Roman period, and the shapes of some of these faience vessels in the 1st century BC and 1st century AD were directly influenced by Aretine ware. Very elaborate, decorated polychrome faience vessels were also produced. Egyptian faience, frit or glazed composition, as it is often termed by Egyptologists, has rather more in common technically with glass manufacture than with earthenware, since it is a non-clay ceramic material. The dividing line between pottery vessels and terracotta figurines is another that is not always sharp, since certain types of small container, such as oil pourers, were sometimes molded in representational forms. Coarsewares. Cooking pots. Pottery was essential for cooking food in antiquity, although metal utensils made of bronze or wine were widely available in the Roman period. Simple, functional earthenware bowls, pans, casseroles and jars were an inexpensive and standard part of the equipment of every kitchen. From Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria, over the length and breadth of a vast empire, local pre-Roman pottery traditions in simple cooking wares often continued without major changes for centuries. Roman cooking pots therefore have to be studied on a regional basis. As well as the ordinary bowls and pans used for cooking, ceramic utensils were made for many specialized uses, such as the small cheese press illustrated to the left of the group photograph of Roman pottery from Britain above. The two black jars to the left behind the cheese press in the same photograph are examples of Romano-British black burnished ware, first made in southwest England in the late Iron Age before the Roman conquest. This ware continued to be popular throughout the Roman period, and was made in greater quantities, and marketed more widely, under Roman influence. Other wares made in Roman Britain were Crambec ware, Huntcliffe ware and Nene Valley color-coated ware, which was often decorated. Mortaria, however, one vessel type used in food preparation, was closely linked with the spread of Roman culture and Roman cuisine, the mortarium. This was a robust, shallow bowl with a thick, out-curved rim that made it easy to handle, often a pouring lip, and an internal surface deliberately roughened with a coating of grit or coarse sand during manufacture. It was used with a pestle to puree or pulverize ingredients in order to prepare elaborate and carefully seasoned Roman dishes. The Roman culinary tradition made extensive use of herbs and spices. The mortarium was the Roman equivalent of the food processor, and is a real indicator of Romanization in Britain. The first mortaria were being imported from Gaulish sources more than a generation before Britain became a Roman province in AD 43, indicating the growing influence of Roman culture in late Iron Age southern Britain, and perhaps the actual presence of immigrants from Gaul. Later, locally made mortaria produced at specialized potteries in different areas of the province were available throughout Britain, in addition to imported products. Paul Tyers discusses mortaria from no fewer than 16 different manufacturing sources, Romano-British and continental. that have been found in Britain. Like so many other specialized Roman ceramic products, many mortaria also bore workshop makers' stamps on the rims, and noting that chronology and distribution can help archaeologists understand trading patterns and the Roman economy. Amphorae description and function. Amphorae, or amphoras, were used during Roman times to transport food on long and short distances. The content was generally liquid, olive oil or wine in most cases, but also garum, the popular fish sauce, and fruit sauce. As a container, an amphora was supposed to be strong, not too heavy, shaped in a way suitable for easy storage in the ship, and, at the same time, convenient for handling once arrived to its final destination. Usually amphorae are two-handled terracotta containers with a globular, cylindrical body, a rim of various shapes, and a spiked or, less commonly, flat base. The spike was suited for a stable storage arrangement in the ship, and it worked as a third handle in the process of emptying the container. Studies on amphorae. The first systematic classification of amphorae types was undertaken by the German scholar Heinrich Dressel, following the exceptional amphorae deposit uncovered in Rome in Castro Pretorio at the end of the 1800s. He collected almost 200 inscriptions from amphorae and included them in the Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum. In his studies of the amphorae deposit, he was the first one to elaborate a classification of types, the so-called Dressel table, which is still used today for many types. Subsequent studies on Roman amphorae have produced more detailed classifications, which are usually named after the scholar who studied them. For the Neo-Phoenician types, see the work by Marner published in 1951, and the revised classification by van der Werf in 1977-1978. The Gallic amphorae have been studied by Laubenheimer in a study published in 1989, whereas the Cretan amphorae have been analyzed by Maringo Lerret. Beltran studied the Spanish types in 1970. Adriatic types have been studied by Lambaglia in 1955. For a general analysis of the Western Mediterranean types, see Panella, and Peacock and Williams. Production amphorae were wheel-thrown terracotta containers. During the production process, the body was made first and then let partially dry. Then, coils of clay would be added to form the neck, the rim, and the handles. Once the amphora was completed, the interior was treated with resin in order to ensure a better performance in liquid storage. The reconstruction of these stages of production is based primarily on ethnographic data coming from the study of modern amphorae production in some areas of the eastern Mediterranean. Amphorae are often marked with a variety of stamps and graffiti. The function of these stamps are related to the entire life of the vessel. Stamps, graffiti and inscriptions provided information from the production cycle to the content and the commercialization. A stamp was usually applied to the amphora at a partially dry stage, and it often indicated the name of the figliner and/or the name of the owner of the workshop. Painted stamps, titularly picti, were executed when the amphora was completed and provided indications regarding the weight of the container and the content. History. The first type of Roman amphora, Dressel I, appears in central Italy in the late 2nd century BCE. This type had thick walls and a characteristic red fabric. It was very heavy, though also strong. Around the middle of the 1st century BCE, the so-called Dressel II-IV starts to become widely used. This type of amphora presented some advantages in being lighter and with thinner walls. It has been calculated that while a ship could accommodate approximately 4,500 Dressel I, it was possible to fit 6,000 Dressel II-IV in the same space. Dressel 2 to 4 were often produced in the same workshops used for the production of Dressel 1, which almost suddenly ceased to be used. At the same time in Cuma the production of the Kadikamani type starts. These containers were mainly used for the transportation of fruit and were used until the Middle Imperial times. At the same time, in central Italy, the so-called spello amphorae, small containers, were produced for the transportation of wine. On the Adriatic coast, the older types were replaced by the Lamboglia II type, a wine amphora commonly produced between the end of the 2nd and the 1st century BCE. This type develops later into the Dressel 6a, which becomes dominant during Augustan times. In the Gallic provinces, the first examples of Roman amphorae were local imitations of pre-existent types such as Dressel 1, Dressel 2 to 4, Pascual 1, and Halton 70. The more typical Gallic production begins within the ceramic ateliers in Marseille during the late Augustan times. The type Obraden 74 was produced to such an extent that it influenced the production of some metallic types. Spanish amphorae became particularly popular thanks to a flourishing production phase in the late Republican times. The Hispania Baetica and Hispania Tarraconensis regions were the main production areas between the 2nd and the 1st century BCE thanks to the land distribution to the veterans in the founding of new colonies. The Spanish amphorae were widely spread in the Mediterranean during the early imperial times. The most common types were all produced in the Baetica, and among these there was the Dressel 20, typical olive oil container, the Dressel 7 to 13, for garum, and the Halton 70 for the de frutum, fruit sauce. In the Tarraconensis region the Pascual 1 was the most common type, a wine amphora shaped onto the Dressel 1, and imitations of Dressel 2 to 4. North African production was based on ancient tradition which could be traced back to the Phoenician colony of Carthage. Phoenician amphorae had characteristic small handles attached directly onto the upper body. This feature becomes the distinctive mark of late Republican, early imperial productions, which are then called Neo-Phoenician. The types produced in Tripolitania and northern Tunisia of the Marna C1 and C2, later renamed Van der Werf 1, 2, and 3. In the Aegean area the types from the island of Rhodes were quite popular starting from the 3rd century BCE thanks to the local wine production which flourished for a long time. This types developed into the Camulodunum 184, an amphora used for the transportation of the Rhodian wine all over the empire. Imitations of the Dressel 2 to 4 were produced in the island of Kos for the transportation of wine from the 4th BCE until the Middle Imperial times. Cretan containers were also popular for the transportation of wine and can be found in the Mediterranean from the Augustan times until the 3rd century CE. During the late Empire, North African types dominated the amphorae production. The so-called African iron II were widely used from the 2nd until the late 4th century CE. Other types from the eastern Mediterranean, such as the so-called late Roman IV, became very popular between the 4th and the 7th century CE. While italic production ceased to exist,